Hi guys, tonight we begin with the extraordinary lives and chaotic chambers of some medieval queens who redefined scandal long before magazine publications. Before you relax, please like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly appreciate the work I do here. In the comments, let me know where you are watching from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for some light background noise, and let's begin our journey together tonight. Let's begin in the 14th century, a time of grand castles, crusading knights, and powerful, often unsettling, women. Our first stop is a figure whose very name would one day evoke both profound admiration and a primal chilling fear. Isabella of France, the daughter of a proud French king, and later the queen of a rather unconventional English monarch. History would come to know her not just as a queen, but as the She-Wolf of France. Isabella arrived in England as a beautiful young princess, a strategic pawn in a royal marriage designed to forge a lasting peace between two rival kingdoms. She was married to King Edward II, a man who was more interested in manual labor and the companionship of his male favorites than the duties of kingship or the affections of his new queen. Imagine the young Isabella fresh from the sophisticated, vibrant court of Paris, a place of art, poetry, and intricate diplomacy, now finding herself in a cold, rather rustic English court perpetually overshadowed by a man her husband clearly adored with an intensity she could not comprehend. The object of Edward's affection was the audacious Gascon knight, Piers Gaveston. He was handsome, charismatic, and in the eyes of the English nobility, a preposterous upstart. He wore the king's jewels, was showered with vast titles, and openly mocked the most powerful men in the kingdom. To a proud and spirited woman like Isabella, who was a daughter of kings and now a queen in her own right, this was more than an inconvenience. It was a profound public humiliation. Her rightful place beside her husband, her dignity, and her strategic influence were all systematically undermined by a man her husband adored more than his own queen. Imagine the slow, simmering bitterness that would build inside a young queen. Her initial hurt slowly transforming into a cold, dangerous resolve. Isabella's life became an exercise in quiet endurance and public humiliation. She was given a secondary role at court, her rightful power and influence usurped by a man the English nobility despised. The barons, for their own political reasons, relentlessly demanded Gaveston's exile, a demand that Edward stubbornly and repeatedly defied. This endless cycle of exile and return became a constant, stinging reminder to Isabella that she was not the center of her husband's universe, nor was she the true power behind the throne. This profound sense of being ignored, of having her very royal identity usurped, was the crucible in which her famous obsession was forged. It was an obsession not with a person, but with a concept. Her dignity. She became obsessed with reclaiming her rightful place, with asserting her power, and with proving to both the English court and to herself that she was more than a mere afterthought. She observed the court's politics, the barons' resentment, and her husband's growing unpopularity. She learned the lay of the land, slowly, patiently, and with a keen, strategic eye. She was biding her time, waiting for the perfect moment to move. That moment arrived when she traveled to her native France. Ostensibly, she was there to negotiate a peace treaty with her brother, King Charles IV. But in reality, this was her escape, her opportunity to finally gather her own forces. It was in France that she finally found an ally who truly understood her profound sense of grievance. A powerful English nobleman named Roger Mortimer. Mortimer had been a bitter enemy of her husband and had been exiled to France for his part in a rebellion. Imagine the moment they met, a neglected queen and a banished lord, both nursing a deep-seated hatred for the same man. Both consumed by a thirst for vengeance and a lust for power. Their alliance was not just political, It became an intimate, passionate, and dangerous affair. Isabella, with Mortimer's help, began to assemble an army of loyal exiles and mercenaries. She used her intelligence, her charm, and her family connections to gather support. Her journey from neglected queen to vengeful leader was complete. She had become so consumed by her desire for power and retribution that she was willing to invade her husband's kingdom and seize the throne. This was the moment she fully embraced the she-wolf persona, cunning, ruthless, and relentless in her pursuit of what she believed was hers. The invasion of England, led by Isabella and Mortimer, was a stunning success. Edward II, so preoccupied with his favorites and so isolated from his people, found little support. The kingdom, weary of his rule and his favorites' influence, welcomed Isabella's forces. Edward was captured and forced to abdicate the throne in favor of his son, the young Edward III. But Isabella's obsession did not end there. Her obsession was not just for the throne, but for the utter destruction of her enemies. Gaveston had been executed years before, but now she had Edward II in her grasp. The details are murky and chilling, but what is clear is that Edward II met a horrific, agonizing end in a dungeon, almost certainly on Isabella's orders. So let's pause here and let that sink in. A woman whose entire life was dismissed and disdained rose to the pinnacle of power by orchestrating the downfall and death of the man who spurned her. She wasn't a myth, not a legend, but a living testament to the truth that even in a world built to silence women, one voice, sharp, strategic, and unyielding, can command an empire. She ruled without apology. She fought without hesitation, and she reigned without defeat. A queen whose tale serves as a powerful reminder that even the most beautiful and seemingly powerless figures can become a force of nature, when their will is bent toward a singular, consuming goal. Isabella's reign as regent alongside her son was a period of immense, unchallenged authority. Yet, it was a power born of violence and maintained through a deep-seated paranoia. She and Roger Mortimer, now her lover and coroller, dominated the court. They accumulated vast wealth and power, often at the expense of other nobles, creating a new wave of discontent. Imagine the irony. A queen who overthrew a king for his reliance on a favorite was now ruling with her own. Her obsession with control had not only brought her to the throne, but it had also consumed her. She grew to mistrust even her own allies. She was a ruler who saw enemies in every shadow, a woman who had tasted absolute power and found it to be a very lonely, very intoxicating meal. The young Edward III, now a teenager, was growing restless. He saw his mother's overreach and her open, scandalous relationship with Mortimer. He witnessed the arrogance of the man who had ordered his father's death. He realized that for him to truly become king, he had to take his throne back, not from an enemy, but from his own mother. The stage was set for a final confrontation. The roles were reversed. Isabella, who had once led a rebellion against a king, was now the one whose authority was being challenged. Her obsession with total control had blinded her to the very real threat growing within her own family. In 1330, Edward III, along with a small group of loyal nobles, orchestrated a daring coup. They surprised Isabella and Mortimer at Nottingham Castle, entering through a secret underground passage. Imagine the sheer terror and shock on Isabella's face as her son's forces burst into her chamber. She pleaded, good son, have pity on the gentle Mortimer." But her pleas fell on deaf ears. Mortimer was captured, tried, and executed as a traitor. Her power was broken. Her obsession had reached its violent, inevitable conclusion. She was stripped of her authority and sent into a long, quiet retirement, living out her days in various manners. She was never truly free, a former queen whose every move was watched. The final years of Isabella of France were a stark and poignant contrast to her tumultuous rise. The she-wolf, who had once commanded armies and brought a king to his knees, now lived a life of quiet luxury, a prisoner in all but name. Her obsession with power had won her a kingdom, but it had also cost her the respect of her son, the love of her people, and ultimately, her freedom. She was a living monument to the fact that the most powerful of ambitions can, in the end, devour the person who holds them. So let's pause here and let that sink in. A woman whose entire life was dismissed and disdained rose to the pinnacle of power by orchestrating the downfall and death of the man who spurned her. She wasn't a myth, not a legend, but a living testament to the truth that even in a world built to silence women, one voice, sharp, strategic, and unyielding, can command an empire. She ruled without apology. She fought without hesitation, and she reigned without defeat. A queen whose tale serves as a powerful reminder that even the most beautiful and seemingly powerless figures can become a force of nature, when their will is bent toward a singular, consuming goal. Let's leave the cold, political machinations of the English court and drift southward. Carried on a gentle breeze across the Mediterranean Sea to the sun-drenched and politically turbulent Kingdom of Naples. Here, in the heart of the 14th century, we find a figure whose very existence was a whirlwind of ambition, scandal, and a shocking disregard for the sanctity of marriage. Our next subject is Joanna of Naples, who was crowned in 1343 and, almost immediately, decided that royal protocol was more of a suggestion than a rule. Where others saw tradition, she saw opportunity, and where others saw one husband, she saw several. Joanna was a woman of immense power from the moment she was born, the granddaughter of the King of Naples, and the heiress to a vast kingdom that included not just southern Italy, but also Provence and France. She inherited the throne at just 16 years old, a young queen with a mind of her own. And, as history would soon prove, a will that bent only to her desires. Her youth and power, however, made her a pawn in a larger dynastic game. She was married at the tender age of 7 to her cousin, Andrew of Hungary, a man with a brutish manner and an overbearing personality. Imagine the young queen, a spirited, intelligent woman, trapped in a loveless marriage to a man who saw her as little more than a means to an end. This arrangement was a perfect storm, a brewing disaster that would define the rest of her reign. Andrew, encouraged by his family, demanded a full share of the royal power and even the right to be crowned king in his own right, a clear affront to Joanna's sovereign authority. Their marriage was a constant battle for dominance, a relentless struggle for control. This conflict, born of incompatible personalities and a clash of wills, led to one of the most shocking events of the medieval era. On a warm September night in 1345, the royal court was staying at Aversa. Andrew was found dead, hanging from a window of his chamber. The official story was that he was a victim of a botched kidnapping. But in the hushed whispers of the court and the public, the story was far more sinister. It was widely believed that a conspiracy orchestrated by those closest to Joanna had murdered her husband. The prime suspects were a cabal of nobles who resented Andrew's ambition. And, most damningly, the queen herself, who was present in the castle that night. Joanna never officially confessed or was convicted. But the scandal was so great that it would follow her for the rest of her life. She was a woman who had been humiliated and dominated, and now it was widely believed she had used her power and her influence to remove the impediment to her absolute rule. Her obsession, not with a person, but with her own unchallengeable authority, was now a matter of public record, stained with the blood of her first husband. Her life after this point became a bizarre carousel of love, lust, and political intrigue. She married a total of 4 times, which in itself was not that unusual for a monarch. What was unusual was the suspicious timing of some of her husband's deaths and her seeming indifference to the political fallout. Her second husband, Louis of Toronto, was a key figure in the alleged murder of Andrew, and their marriage was a political move designed to consolidate her power. Their union, while seemingly happy, did not last, and with his death, she was once again free. This cycle continued. Her third marriage to James IV of Majorca and her fourth to Otto of Brunswick were a series of calculated political alliances, each one designed to shore up her power and maintain the stability of her throne. But throughout all this, her own personal scandals and her inability to produce a lasting heir continued to fuel the rumors and suspicions of her subjects. She was a queen who was admired for her intelligence and beauty, but whose moral depravity and unquenchable thirst for power made her a terrifying figure. Her infamy was not just a matter of speculation. It was a lived reality. Imagine, if you will, the whispers that followed her everywhere she went. It was said she had a trapdoor built beneath her bed, a rather creative solution for ending a date when words just wouldn't do. After a night of royal intimacy, the floor would allegedly open beneath her partner, sending him tumbling into a castle dungeon or, some whispered, into a pit of vipers. This legend, whether true or not, perfectly captured the essence of her public persona, a beautiful, charming woman with a dark and deadly secret, a woman who treated men as disposable tools in her pursuit of pleasure and power. Joanna's final years were as chaotic as her reign. She was excommunicated by the Pope for her role in Andrew's death, and her legitimacy was constantly challenged by a slew of rivals. The political alliances she had so carefully constructed crumbled, and she was eventually captured by her rival and distant cousin, Charles of Durazzo. Her end was as brutal as her reign had been scandalous. She was suffocated, a grim and fitting end for a woman whose life had been one of violent, desperate struggles. So let's pause here and let that sink in. A woman whose entire life was a testament to her unyielding will. Used her power to murder her own husband and then ruled a kingdom through a series of calculated, amoral political maneuvers. She was not a myth, not a legend, but a living testament to the truth that even in a world built to silence women, one voice, sharp, strategic, and unyielding, can command an empire. She ruled without apology. She fought without hesitation. And she reigned without defeat. A queen whose tale serves as a powerful reminder that the most consuming of obsessions can be born from the simple. Desperate need for absolute power in a world that sought to constrain you. Let's drift now from the troubled courts of Europe, from the blood-soaked stones of Naples and the chilly halls of England. Our journey takes us far across the seas, into the treacherous waters of the South China coast in the early 19th century. This is a time of immense trade, colonial ambition, and most importantly for our story, it's the reign of a figure whose obsession was not with a throne on land, but with an empire built on the high seas. Our subject is a woman who, though not a queen in the royal sense, was arguably more powerful than any monarch of her time. Zhang Yi Sao, a former prostitute who became the undisputed empress of the pirate world. Zhang Yi Sao's story begins not with a royal birth, but with a life in a floating brothel in Canton. Her ascent from this low station to the head of a massive pirate confederation is a testament to her intelligence, ambition, and a relentless, almost maniacal, obsession with power and control. She was noticed by the notorious pirate captain Zhang Yi, and to his surprise, she did not simply accept his proposal of marriage. She negotiated it. The legend says she agreed to marry him only on the condition that she would have an equal say in the command of his fleet and a share of the plunder. It was an unprecedented arrangement, a woman demanding power in a world ruled by brutal, superstitious men. This was not a passive alliance. It was the foundation of her obsession with absolute control. Upon her marriage, she immediately set about proving her worth. She was not just a figurehead. She was a brilliant strategist and an even more cunning administrator. While her husband commanded the ships in battle, she managed the political intricacies of their confederation, forging alliances, distributing wealth, and enforcing a strict and at times depraved code of conduct. She was obsessed with order, with creating a unified empire out of a chaotic band of cutthroats. Under her influence and her husband's command, the pirate fleet, known as the Red Flag Fleet, grew from a few hundred ships to an armada of over 1,800 vessels and an estimated 80,000 pirates. It was a force so immense that it challenged the authority of the Chinese Imperial Navy and the navies of the British and Portuguese empires. Her obsession with control was absolute, and it was reflected in the iron-fisted rules she created. Her code was simple, brutal, and utterly without mercy. Disobey an order, and your head was removed. Steal from the common fund, and you would be flogged. But the most infamous and revealing rules concerned the treatment of women. Any pirate who assaulted a female captive was to be immediately executed, and if a pirate took a female captive as a wife, he was to be faithful to her. It was a shocking juxtaposition of morality in a world without morals. A clear reflection of a woman who had herself been exploited and was now obsessed with establishing an order where her will and her will alone was law. It was an obsession with carving out a place of power where women were not property, but subjects of a new kind of empire. But her story of depravity is as pronounced as her story of control. When her husband died unexpectedly, she was faced with a pivotal choice. The Confederation was a fragile entity held together by his authority and her cunning. She needed a new leader, a new figurehead. She found him in her husband's adopted son and her lover, Chang Pao. Their relationship, while intimate, was also a purely pragmatic power play. She secured her position as the fleet's ultimate commander, while he, a skilled captain, became her loyal subordinate. She solidified her power not just through military might, but through an absolute control over her personal life, using men as she saw fit to achieve her ultimate goal. Zhang Yi Sao's most profound demonstration of her obsession was in her negotiation with the Chinese government. The imperial court, humiliated by their repeated defeats at her hands, offered an amnesty to all pirates. Most would have accepted a pardon and retired with their immense wealth. But Zhang Yi Sao was not like most people. Her obsession was not with wealth, it was with the legacy. She demanded not just a pardon for herself and her men, but a place in society for them. She wanted to transform her pirate empire into a legitimate business enterprise. She negotiated a deal that was utterly unprecedented. She would disband the fleet, but in return, the government would integrate her men into the navy and the civilian life, and she and Chang Pao would be given prestigious titles and roles. She had essentially held an empire hostage and then demanded a seat at the table. This was the ultimate expression of her obsession. She had not only commanded an army of pirates, but she had forced an entire empire to bow to her will. She had taken a life of chaos and depravity and, through sheer unyielding will, transformed it into a life of legitimacy and power. She had not only conquered the sea, but she had conquered the very notion of what a woman in her station could achieve. She had built a legacy that was utterly without equal. She retired to a life of immense wealth, running a successful smuggling ring and operating a gambling house, proving that even in retirement, her obsession with power and control never truly waned. So let's pause here and let that sink in. A woman whose entire life began at the lowest rungs of society rose to the pinnacle of power by sheer force of will and an absolute obsession with command. She wasn't a myth, not a legend, but a living testament to the truth that even in a world built to silence women, One voice, sharp, strategic, and unyielding, can command an empire. She ruled without apology. She fought without hesitation. And she reigned without defeat. A queen whose tale serves as a powerful reminder that the most consuming of obsessions can be born from the simple, desperate need for absolute power in a world that sought to erase you. Let us now move from the tempestuous courts of the medieval world and the blood-soaked seas of the South China coast. Our final journey takes us to the vast, icy heart of imperial Russia in the 18th century, to a figure whose obsession with power, love, and legacy would not just define her own life, but would fundamentally reshape a nation. Our subject is a woman who was born a minor German princess, but who would become the empress and autocrat of all Russia, Catherine the Great. Her story is a testament to the ruthless, calculated ambition of a woman who was obsessed not just with a throne, but with a grand, almost mythic vision of herself as a philosopher, a conqueror, and the very embodiment of a new, enlightened Russia. Her journey to power began with a deeply unhappy arranged marriage. She was born Sophia of Anhalt-Zerbst, a small principality in what is now Germany, and was brought to Russia at the age of 14 to marry the heir to the Russian throne, the bizarre and childish Grand Duke Peter. Imagine her arrival, a young, intelligent girl in a foreign land, surrounded by a hostile court and married to a man who, by all accounts, was an immature, cruel, and mentally unstable boy. Peter would spend his days playing with toy soldiers, torturing animals, and publicly humiliating her. He was obsessed with his own small, petty pursuits, and in his narcissism, he completely failed to recognize the simmering intelligence and ambition of the woman he had been forced to marry. For years, Catherine endured this life of quiet desperation. She was a keen observer, a brilliant student of human nature, and she used her isolation to her advantage. She immersed herself in Russian culture, mastering the language, studying Russian history, and converting to the Orthodox faith with a passion that shamed the native-born members of the court. She cultivated a network of powerful allies, both within the military and the nobility. And she did so with a charm and a strategic cunning that her husband entirely lacked. While Peter alienated everyone around him with his erratic behavior and his obsession with his native Prussia, Catherine became the living embodiment of Russian ideals. This was not a passive life. It was an active, prolonged, and utterly ruthless apprenticeship in power. Her obsession was not with revenge, not at first, but with her own survival. She had to become more Russian than the Russians, a calculated act designed to secure her position in a world that would have otherwise consumed her. This prolonged period of public humiliation and quiet endurance became the forge for a new, all-consuming obsession, to not just survive, but to rule. The opportunity presented itself when her husband, Peter, finally became emperor. His brief reign was a complete disaster. He was a disaster as a ruler. He alienated the military by making peace with his archenemy, Prussia, and humiliated the Orthodox Church by attempting to secularize its lands. He was a tyrant in his own home and an utter failure on the throne. The court, the military, and the people of Russia, all disgusted by his rule, began to turn to the one person who had shown them loyalty, intelligence, and a true love for Russia, Catherine. In 1762, with the support of the Orlov brothers, her lovers and key military figures, Catherine orchestrated a swift and bloodless coup. Peter was arrested and forced to abdicate. His reign lasted only 6 months. He was assassinated shortly after in a suspicious quarrel. While Catherine was never officially implicated, the official story of his death was so flimsy that no one believed it. It was a clear demonstration of her newfound power and her utter willingness to resort to extreme measures to secure her throne. Her obsession had transitioned from survival to domination. She had gone from being a humiliated bride to a ruthless empress in the blink of an eye. Her rule was a magnificent, contradictory, and at times depraved testament to her lifelong obsession with greatness. She was a patron of the arts, a correspondent with Voltaire and Diderot, a lover of philosophy who styled herself as an enlightened despot. She built new cities, expanded Russia's territory, and modernized the government. She was obsessed with her legacy, with being remembered as a great ruler on par with her namesake, Peter the Great. But her obsession with power was just as great as her obsession with enlightenment. She was known for her series of powerful and often short-lived lovers. These were not just romantic dalliances, they were carefully curated political alliances. She used men to strengthen her position, to reward loyalty, and to keep rivals off balance. She was a woman who was so consumed by her need for control that she had become a master of using desire itself as a political tool. The rumor mill of the Russian court was a vibrant and dangerous place. It was said that she had her lovers sign contracts and that they were rewarded with riches and titles if they remained faithful, and cast aside if they didn't. She was a queen who was not just a symbol of power, but a living embodiment of it, using her body and her will to bend the world around her to her command. Her most infamous and a perversion of her maternal duty came in her relationship with her son, Paul. She was obsessed with securing the throne for herself and had a deep mistrust of her son, who she believed was a threat to her rule. She actively worked to sideline him, excluding him from affairs of state and even attempting to change the succession laws to favor her grandson. This obsession with control, this unwillingness to give up even an ounce of her power, was a profound and deeply personal tragedy. She was willing to sacrifice a normal relationship with her own son for the sake of her political dominance. She was not just a queen who manipulated men. She was a woman who was so consumed by her own ambition that she had lost the ability to love unconditionally. Catherine the Great's reign of over 3 decades was a period of incredible growth and expansion for Russia. But it was a reign built on a foundation of ruthless ambition, moral compromises, and a singular, all-consuming obsession with being a truly great ruler. She was not just a queen. She was a force of nature who remade a country in her own image, and in doing so, became a living testament to the fact that power, when held by a woman who is unafraid to do what is necessary, can be the most beautiful and the most terrifying force on earth. So, let's pause here and let that sink in. A woman whose entire life began at the lowest rungs of society, rose to the pinnacle of power by sheer force of will and an absolute obsession with command. She wasn't a myth, not a legend, but a living testament to the truth that even in a world built to silence women, one voice, sharp, strategic, and unyielding, can command an empire. She ruled without apology. She fought without hesitation. And she reigned without defeat. A queen whose tale serves as a powerful reminder that the most consuming of obsessions can be born from the simple, desperate need for absolute power in a world that sought to erase you. Now, let us leave the grand and somber courts of Europe and the treacherous pirate-infested seas of China. Our journey takes us back in time to the cold, forgotten castles of 16th century Hungary and Transylvania. Here, within the chilling embrace of fortified walls, we find a figure who, though not a queen, wielded power so absolute and committed acts so depraved that her name has become synonymous with blood and obsession. Our subject is Elizabeth, a noblewoman whose legacy is not defined by her title, but by her sins. Was born into one of the wealthiest and most powerful families in Hungary, a lineage that produced kings and princes and was both feared and respected across Central Europe. From an early age, Elizabeth was exposed to the brutal nature of her class. She was a witness to the savage punishments, the political cruelty, and the moral depravity that was often a silent part of aristocratic life. At the age of 15, she was married to Count Ferenc, a powerful and fearsome nobleman. This marriage, far from being a simple political alliance, became the stage upon which Elizabeth's darkest obsessions would take root and bloom. While her husband was away at war, a common occurrence for a military man, Elizabeth was left to manage her vast estates alone. This solitude and unchallenged authority only served to fuel her burgeoning obsession with control. Within the high, cold walls of Lactus Castle, she established a kingdom where her word was absolute law and the world outside was powerless to interfere. Her obsession, at first, was merely with holding onto power, with bowing to no authority but her own. However, this obsession soon spiraled into a more sinister and particular fixation: the obsession with eternal youth and beauty. The fear of aging, of losing the vibrancy of her youth, began to consume her. She started to punish her servants, young girls brought from the surrounding villages, with a cruelty that was as inventive as it was horrific. Her punishments became torturous rituals. She would burn them, pierce them with needles, and inflict unimaginable pain. At first, this was merely a sadistic pleasure, a byproduct of her absolute power. But then, legend has it, an incident occurred that would transform her cruelty into a blood-soaked obsession. While beating a servant girl, a drop of the girl's blood splattered onto her skin. When she wiped it away, she imagined her skin was more youthful and smooth. This was the moment of her gruesome revelation. She became utterly convinced that the life force of young women, their very blood, held the key to her eternal youth. From that moment on, her obsession became a monstrous ritual. She had hundreds of young girls brought to her castle, some willingly, most by force. They were tortured and murdered in her private chambers. Their blood, collected in vats and bathtubs, would then bathe in the blood, believing it would rejuvenate her body. These actions were not just hidden perversions. They were a macabre demonstration of her power and her absolute untouchability. She behaved as a queen would, believing herself to be above the law. A ruler in her own right, with life and death in her hands. Peasant girls disappeared. Families whispered of the horrors of the castle, but no one dared speak the truth aloud. The immense power and social standing of the family shielded her from any form of justice. Her reign of terror, however, came to an end when she began to target young women of noble birth. The disappearance of a well-connected young lady could not be so easily dismissed. In 1610, acting on orders from the King of Hungary, Count George, a cousin of S., raided her castle. What he found was a scene of unspeakable horror. The evidence of her crimes was everywhere: tortured bodies, blood-stained chambers, and the instruments of her cruelty. At that moment, her reign of absolute power crumbled. Accused of murdering hundreds, perhaps as many as 650, she was never formally put on trial. Her noble status protected her from that humiliation. Instead, she was sentenced to a life of imprisonment in her own castle. She was bricked into a room with only a small opening to receive food and water. She died 4 years later, in 1614, alone in the very castle where she had once held absolute and terrifying power. S. story is a chilling reminder of how power can corrupt and how an obsession can lead to unimaginable depravity. Her fixation on youth, beauty, and control turned her into a monster and ultimately led to her own gruesome end. She was not a myth, but a real-life horror story. Her tale serves as a testament to the dark truth that when a person is utterly consumed by their own obsessions, they become a terrifying and dangerous force. Let's leave the chilling stories of medieval Europe and a pirate queen's dominion, and journey back in time, over a millennium, to the heart of the Roman Empire. This is a world of marble, political intrigue, and brutal power struggles. A stage where our next subject would not just play a role, but would write the script herself with cunning and blood. Our subject is Agrippina, the younger, a woman, whose singular all-consuming obsession with power would lead her to manipulate emperors, betray her family, and ultimately place her own son on the throne with herself as the true power behind it. Agrippina was born into a dynasty of emperors. Her father was Germanicus, a revered general, and her mother was Agrippina the Elder, a granddaughter of the first emperor Augustus. From birth, she was destined for a life of privilege and political importance. However, the world she inherited was a viper's nest. Her own mother and two brothers were exiled and starved to death by the Emperor Tiberius. Her sister was also exiled. She herself was exiled by her brother Caligula, a man whose tyrannical reign was a testament to the family's madness. She learned a brutal but invaluable lesson in this world. Power was not something you were given, but something you had to take, hold on to, and protect at all costs. This became the foundation of her all-consuming obsession. She was obsessed not just with having power, but with being the source of power. When she was allowed to return from exile, she was a changed woman, a cunning survivor who had learned how to play the long game. She married the powerful general Gnaeus Domitius, and together they had a son, Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus. This son, the future Emperor Nero, was not just her child. He was her project, her tool, and the ultimate vessel for her ambition. Her obsession was no longer just about her own survival, but about ensuring her bloodline would rule the empire through her. Her machinations began in earnest after the death of her husband. She set her sights on her uncle, Emperor Claudius. He was an older man, a scholar who was more interested in history than in the ruthless games of power. She seduced him, charmed him, and made him fall under her influence. The Roman historian Tacitus wrote of her as a woman who was singularly driven by ambition, and who used her beauty and charm as instruments of power. Her depravity was clear in her willingness to use anyone and anything to get what she wanted. She convinced Claudius to marry her, an act that was considered almost incestuous and a complete scandal in Rome. Once empress, her obsession reached its peak. She was not content to simply be the emperor's wife. She began to consolidate power, removing rivals and elevating her own allies. She used her influence to have the Roman Senate pass an unprecedented law that allowed a woman to ride in the imperial carriage, a privilege previously reserved only for the emperor. She was a woman who was obsessed with the symbols of power, with the public display of her new, almost divine status. Her ultimate obsession, however, was her son, Nero. She was obsessed with his ascension to the throne and with ensuring that she would be the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. She convinced Claudius to adopt her son and name him as his heir, an act that completely bypassed Claudius's own son, Britannicus. This was a move of breathtaking cruelty and ambition, a mother sacrificing her stepson for her own selfish desires. When Claudius began to show signs of regretting his decision, she had him poisoned. It was a cold, calculated murder, a direct result of her unyielding obsession with placing her son on the throne. With Nero as emperor, Agrippina became the most powerful woman in Rome, arguably the most powerful woman in the world. She was the power behind the throne, the one who ruled through her son. For a time, Nero listened to her, relying on her political counsel and her ruthless instincts. Their relationship was a twisted, codependent dance of power and control. But Nero was not content to be his mother's puppet. He began to resent her influence, her constant demands, and her all-consuming obsession with controlling his every move. The conflict between mother and son became a battle for the soul of the empire. Nero's obsession with his own artistic pursuits and his love for the beautiful Poppaea. Sabina clashed with Agrippina's obsession with a purely political rule. The final act of this tragic drama was as brutal as their lives had been. Nero, tired of her constant interference, tried to have her assassinated multiple times. First, he attempted to have her drowned in a collapsible boat, a plan that failed spectacularly. When she survived, he had her stabbed to death in her villa. Her death was a gruesome and fitting end to a life of ambition and moral depravity. The Roman historian Tacitus wrote that she commanded her assassins to strike her in the womb, a chilling testament to the fact that her death, like her life, was a twisted reflection of her obsession with the son she had used for her own ends. So let's pause here and let that sink in. A woman whose entire life was a testament to a singular obsession with power, who manipulated a dynasty and sacrificed her own family to secure a place on the throne. She was not a myth, not a legend, but a living testament to the truth that even in a world built to silence women, one voice, sharp, strategic, and unyielding, can command an empire. She ruled without apology. She fought without hesitation, and she reigned without defeat. A queen whose tale serves as a powerful reminder that the most consuming of obsessions can be born from the simple, desperate need for absolute power in a world that sought to contain you. Let us now leave the sun-drenched marble of ancient Rome and journey to the heart of the Holy Roman Empire in the 10th century. This is a world of fierce princes, warring dukes, and a powerful, yet fragile, imperial throne. Our next subject is a woman who, though she was an empress, would wield her power not through military conquest, but through a cunning and ruthless mastery of political intrigue. Our subject is Theophanu, a Byzantine princess who would become the empress of a foreign land. A woman whose singular obsession was to secure a dynasty and to establish her own absolute authority in a world ruled by men. Theophanu's story begins not in a battlefield, but in the opulent and suffocating court of Constantinople, the heart of the Byzantine Empire. She was born into a world of complex rituals, elaborate ceremonies, and political backstabbing. Her lineage was a matter of debate, with some historians claiming she was a commoner and others a princess. But what is certain is that she was a woman of immense intelligence and ambition. At the age of 12, she was sent to the Holy Roman Empire to marry the heir, Otto II. In a political marriage designed to forge an alliance between East and West. Imagine her arrival, a young girl, raised in the dazzling sophistication of Constantinople, now finding herself in the rougher, more provincial courts of Germany. She was a Greek among Germans, a woman of sharp intellect, surrounded by men who valued brute strength and piety over wit. This displacement and her foreignness became the crucible for her obsession. She was not content to be a mere pawn, a silent queen in a strange land. She was obsessed with proving her worth, with showing the German nobility that she was more than just a bride. She was a ruler in her own right. She brought with her the sophisticated culture, the elaborate court rituals, and the political cunning of Byzantium. She was a woman who was determined to remake her new world in the image of her old one, to infuse the raw power of the German throne with the sophisticated, almost Machiavellian, grace of Constantinople. Her obsession with power became a public spectacle. She began to involve herself directly in politics, advising her husband and, after his death, acting as regent for her young son, Otto III. The German nobility, unused to a woman wielding such authority, resented her. She was a woman who was not afraid to challenge their traditions, to sideline their authority, and to rule with an iron fist. She was a queen who was not just an ornament, but a living, breathing force of nature who made her own rules. Her critics called her the Greek, a term meant to signify her foreignness and her perceived immorality. But for Theophanu, it was a badge of honor, a reminder that she was an outsider, and therefore could play the game by her own rules. Her most significant, and a testament to her ruthless ambition, was her relationship with her own son, Otto III. She was obsessed with his destiny, and with ensuring that he would not just be a king, but a true emperor, a man who would unite the disparate kingdoms of Europe under his rule. She was not a doting mother, but a political mentor, a woman who taught her son that power was the only thing that mattered. She arranged for his coronation as emperor at the age of 3, a move of breathtaking audacity and a clear signal to her rivals that she was in charge. Her obsession was not just for herself, but for her legacy, for a world where her bloodline would rule forever. She outmaneuvered her rivals, including her brother-in-law, Henry the Quarrelsome, a man who saw her as a foreign usurper and who tried to seize the regency for himself. She used her intelligence, her charm, and her political connections to defeat him, securing her son's throne and her own place as the true power behind it. She was a woman who was willing to do whatever was necessary to get what she wanted. Her obsession with power, however, had a tragic and ironic twist. She had worked so tirelessly to secure her son's throne, but she would not live to see him reach adulthood. She died at the age of 30, a woman whose life was a whirlwind of ambition and political intrigue, a life cut short just as her son was beginning to truly rule. Her death was a shock to the empire. The German nobility, who had resented her in life, were now faced with a young, inexperienced emperor who was suddenly without his mother's political guidance. Theophanu's reign of over a decade as regent was a period of immense stability and growth for the empire. She was not just a symbol of power, but a living embodiment of it, using her wits and her will to bend the world around her to her command. She was a woman who was so consumed by her need for control that she had become a master of using intelligence itself as a political tool. She was not just a queen who manipulated men. She was a woman who was so consumed by her own ambition that she had lost the ability to love unconditionally. Theophanu's reign was a magnificent, contradictory, and at times depraved testament to her lifelong obsession with greatness. She was a patron of the arts, a brilliant diplomat, and a ruthless politician who styled herself as a true ruler. She was obsessed with her legacy, with being remembered as a great ruler on par with her husband and her son. So let's pause here and let that sink in. A woman whose entire life was a testament to a singular obsession with power, who manipulated a dynasty and sacrificed her own family to secure a place on the throne. She was not a myth, not a legend, but a living testament to the truth that even in a world built to silence women, one voice, sharp, strategic, and unyielding, can command an empire. She ruled without apology. She fought without hesitation. And she reigned without defeat. A queen whose tale serves as a powerful reminder that the most consuming of obsessions can be born from the simple, desperate need for absolute power in a world that sought to contain you. Now, let us leave the medieval gloom and the ancient imperial intrigue behind, and venture into the dazzling, yet depraved, world of Renaissance Italy. This is a time of artistic brilliance and scientific discovery, but also a world ruled by poison, betrayal, and unbridled ambition. At the very heart of this turbulent era stands the notorious Borgia family, a dynasty whose relentless obsession with power would shape the fate of a continent. Our subject is a woman who is a pawn in this grand, wicked game, Lucretia Borgia. Figure caught between a life of scandal and a desperate private search for redemption. Lucretia's existence was a symbol of her family's obsession. Her life was not her own. From a young age, she was a tool, a means to an end for her father, Pope Alexander VI, and her older brother Cesare Borgia. Their ambition was singular and ruthless, to secure their dynasty's power over Italy at any cost. Lucretia's marriages were not unions of love or choice, but carefully calculated political maneuvers. Each time, she was a bartered commodity, a living, breathing treaty, used to forge alliances that would strengthen the Borgia grip on power. This complete lack of control over her own destiny would fuel a quiet, desperate obsession of her own, a yearning for independence, a deep-seated desire to escape the suffocating shadow of her family's infamy. Her first marriage to Giovanni Sforza, a nephew of the Duke of Milan, was purely a political transaction. It was a union designed to secure the Borgia's influence in northern Italy. But when the alliance was no longer politically useful, her father, the Pope, annulled the marriage. Lucretia was forced to agree, an act that sparked a firestorm of scandalous rumors across Europe, including whispers of incestuous relationships with her father and brother. Whether true or not, these rumors became a permanent stain on her reputation and a testament to her family's moral depravity. Lucretia's life was a cycle of tragedy and manipulation. Her second marriage was to Alfonso of Aragon, a man she truly came to love. This union offered her a glimpse of genuine affection and a taste of a life beyond her family's cruel machinations. She was, for the first time, happy. But this happiness was fleeting. When her family's political needs shifted, Alfonso became an impediment. Her brother, Cesare, in a move of cold-blooded tactical violence, had him attacked. When the initial attempt to kill Alfonso failed, Cesare had him assassinated in a brazen act of murder. Lucretia's heart was broken. Her first true love was a casualty of her brother's insatiable hunger for power. This horrifying event became a turning point for Lucretia. She could no longer be a passive victim. She started to develop her own obsession with power, not the raw, brutal kind her family possessed, but a more subtle and enduring kind. The power of reputation, of influence, and of a life of her own. Her final marriage to Alfonso d'Este, Duke of Ferrara, was her last chance at escape. In Ferrara, she shed her scandalous past and reinvented herself. She became a patron of the arts, a compassionate duchess, and a respected figure in her own right. She had finally achieved a form of power that was her own, one built not on betrayal and deceit, but on kindness and genuine influence. Lucretia's life is a testament to the devastating effects of a family. S's obsession and to a woman's own desperate will to survive. She was born into a nest of vipers, a victim of a depraved and power-hungry family, but she ultimately found a way to forge her own destiny. She was an emblem of the Renaissance fusion of immense artistic beauty and profound moral decay. Her story is a reminder that even in the darkest of circumstances, a person can find a way to create a life of their own. To find a form of power that is a force for good, not just for destruction. So, let's pause here and let that sink in. A woman whose entire life was a testament to her family's obsessive need for power, who was forced to be a pawn in their brutal game. She was not a myth, not a legend, but a living testament to the truth that even in a world built on lies and betrayal, one voice, sharp, strategic, and unyielding, can command a new destiny. She ruled without apology. She fought without hesitation, and she reigned without defeat. A queen whose tale serves as a powerful reminder that the most consuming of obsessions can be born from the simple, desperate need for absolute power in a world that sought to erase you. Let us now leave the fragmented power struggles of Renaissance, Italy, and the tumultuous courts of ancient Rome. Our final historical journey takes us to the opulent, ritualistic, and utterly brutal world of 7th century Tang Dynasty China. This is an empire of immense wealth, intellectual sophistication, and an unyielding patriarchal order that had held for millennia. Within this rigid system, one woman, fueled by a singular and all-consuming obsession with power, would defy every rule and tradition to ascend to a throne that had never before been held by a woman. Our subject is Wu Zetian, a low-ranking concubine, who would become the only female emperor in China's history. Wu Zetian's story began not with a noble birth, but with a humble one. She entered the Forbidden City as a minor concubine to Emperor Taizong. In a world of thousands of women vying for the emperor's favor, Her survival depended on her intelligence and cunning. She was a keen observer, a brilliant strategist, and a woman who understood that in this world her beauty alone would not secure her future. Her obsession was born from this understanding, a desperate need to not just survive, but to rise to the pinnacle of power, to make herself untouchable. Her first step on this ruthless path was to secure her position in the court. She caught the eye of the crown prince, who would later become Emperor Gaozong. When the old emperor died, she was sent to a monastery, as was the custom for all his childless concubines. But she was not a woman who accepted fate. She used her connection to the new emperor to secure her return to the court, a move that was both unheard of and a sign of her unyielding will. Upon her return, her ambition, once a simmering fire, became an inferno. She began to systematically eliminate her rivals. Her primary rival was the Empress Wang, a kind but politically naive woman. To frame the empress, Wu Zetian committed an act of unspeakable depravity. She murdered her own infant daughter, a shocking act of cold-blooded cruelty, and then blamed the empress. This horrifying act, a testament to her obsession, worked. The Empress Wang was deposed and murdered, and Wu Zetian was elevated to her place. She had used a deeply personal tragedy as a political weapon, a clear sign that for her, nothing, not even the life of her own child, was more important than her ascent to power. As empress, she was not content to remain in the shadows. Her obsession was not with being a puppet master, but with being the undisputed ruler. She became her husband's closest advisor, a partner in governance who was more powerful than any of his ministers. When Emperor Gaozong suffered a debilitating stroke, she seized the opportunity. Taking over all administrative duties and becoming the de facto ruler of the empire. She was a woman who was obsessed with every aspect of governance, with the details of bureaucracy, and with the grand sweeping vision of an empire in her own image. After her husband's death, she took the final, and most shocking, step. After deposing her own sons from the throne, she proclaimed herself Empress Regnant, the first and only female emperor in China's history. It was a move of breathtaking audacity, an act that defied every tradition and social norm of her time. She renamed the dynasty and ruled for 15 years. Her reign was marked by a series of ruthless purges where she eliminated anyone who dared to question her authority. Her obsession was with absolute loyalty, with a court that would bow to her every whim, and with a legacy that would be etched in history forever. But her reign was also a period of immense progress. She was a brilliant ruler who implemented sweeping reforms, promoted education and merit-based appointments, and expanded the empire's territory. She was a woman of profound contradictions, a ruthless killer who also ruled with a progressive vision, a depraved figure who also championed the arts and literature. Her obsession with power was not just for its own sake. It was to prove that a woman could be a better ruler than any man. Wu Zetian's life is a testament to the dark side of ambition and the incredible power of a single, unyielding will. She was a concubine who became an empress, a woman who rose from the lowest rung of society to the highest, and in doing so, she remade an empire in her own image. She was a woman whose tale serves as a powerful reminder that the most consuming of obsessions can be born from the simple, desperate need for absolute power in a world that sought to contain you. Let us now leave the silent, dusty halls of history and the echo of the powerful women we have met. We have journeyed through blood-soaked medieval courts, across the lawless seas of pirates, and into the depraved heart of imperial Rome and China. We have seen queens and empresses, consorts and concubines, all bound by a singular, consuming obsession with power. Our final subject is a figure who embodies all these themes. A woman whose singular obsession was not just with a throne, but with a legacy so grand and so enduring that she would be forever known as Catherine the Great. a ruler who, like the others, was a master of ambition, manipulation, and moral complexity. Catherine's story is a final testament to the contradictory nature of these women. She was born a minor German princess with no claim to a throne, and arrived in Russia to marry a man who would become her jailer and her puppet. But she would not be defined by her circumstances. She was a woman who was obsessed with control, with remaking herself and an entire empire in her own image. Her reign was a study in paradox, an enlightened despot who corresponded with philosophers while her armies brutally crushed peasant rebellions. She was a patron of the arts who built magnificent palaces and art collections. Yet she expanded serfdom, tying millions of people to the land like slaves. Her obsession with glory, with being a ruler on par with her namesake. Peter the Great drove her to expand the Russian Empire's territory, waging wars that cost thousands of lives. But her most profound obsession was with her legacy. She was not just a queen who sought power. She was a woman who sought immortality. She wanted to be remembered as a great ruler, a philosopher, a modernizer. She was obsessed with the idea of a new Russia, a grand, powerful, and enlightened nation. And she was willing to sacrifice anyone and anything to bring this vision to life. She was willing to sideline her own son, a man who she believed was not worthy of the throne. And she was willing to use her lovers as pawns in her political chess game. Her life was a performance, a constant battle to control not just her empire, but her narrative, her place in history. So, let us end our journey here, on the snowy plains of Russia, with the image of a woman who, like the others, was both a hero and a villain. She was a woman who, by all accounts, was ruthless, amoral, and a master of political manipulation. But she was also a woman of immense intellect, vision, and a determination that knew no bounds. We have now seen the full tapestry of power in all its brutal, beautiful, and terrifying glory. We have seen queens who killed for love, who bathed in blood to stay young, who poisoned their way to the throne, and who destroyed their own families to hold on to power. They were all different, separated by centuries and continents. But they were all bound by a single, powerful truth. In a world where women were meant to be silent and subservient, they found a way to not just speak, but to command. Their obsessions, whether for love, beauty, or absolute power, made them not just queens, but legends. They remind us that history is not just a story of men, but also a story of a woman's unyielding, all-consuming will.